So our next presenter is Dan Sorensen, who's going to talk about King County. Oh, sorry, who's going to talk about the Healthy Lands Project. Dan has been with the King County Noxious Weed Control Program for over 6 years. In his current role, he manages the Healthy Lands Project, whose aim is to implement noxious weed control and foster stewardship on conservation lands throughout King County. He has over 15 years experience in stewardship and restoration. He holds a master's degree from the University of Washington in restoration ecology and environmental horticulture, and he also volunteers at a local greenbelt in Seattle, removing blackberry and ivy to give the future forest there the best chance to thrive.
Thank you for that introduction. It's been such great presentations today, folks. It's been really nice to hear everyone. And we're almost there, so thank you all for sticking with us. And I'm here today to talk to you about the Healthy Lands Project. The Healthy Lands Project, I'm going to give sort of a big, broad overview. There's a lot of facets to it, and certainly ask questions. I'll try to answer them, and you can always contact me after for more information. But we've all been where this person is photographed standing in a plethora of noxious weeds, wondering what to do. And so the Healthy Lands Project, in some ways, helps the landowner to avoid sort of feeling so overwhelmed by their weed issues. Let me just give a plug for the program that I'm a part of, the King County Noxious Weed Control Program. And we have some great resources on our website if you are unaware of that. I know this is sort of a little south of where a lot of folks are coming from today, but we have some great fact sheets and BMPs. We also have a really fun Instagram account, so if you're not following us already, you should totally follow us. And a quarterly blog post that goes out, and we talk about all things noxious weeds, and that's a lot of fun too. So check us out on all the sort of channels, and hopefully you can make some laughs through learn some stuff, have some laughs through the Instagram, and if you ever need us, here's our email and contact information. We get calls from all across the country, so we will for sure take calls from Skagit, Whatcom, and other counties north. So the Healthy Lands Project, it kind of all started with ivy. Historically, the King County Noxious Weed Control Program focused their efforts on mostly the weeds that are designated for control by the state and county board. We call them regulated weeds in King County. So if a noxious weed is designated for control at the state level or the county level, we call it regulated, regardless of its weed class. I mean, we certainly prioritize the Class A weeds and some higher priority Class Bs versus the designated Bs, and we have a few designated Cs. But ivy is a Class C, and it is not designated. In 2017, 2018, our county executive said, "Hey, you're the noxious weed program. Ivy's a noxious weed. What are you going to do to control it?" And so he said, "Come up with a proposal." So folks came up with a proposal, and it was modest, kind of within the means. And then he said, "Well, think bigger." And so sort of expanding out, the issue with all these unregulated weeds, which tend to be the more widespread weeds, is that they're everywhere. And, how do you sort of bound or constrain what we can do across the landscape? It was chosen that we're going to focus on sort of conservation lands, and we're going to kind of build a noxious weed control program, we're going to expand our program into the areas that are sort of identified by the Land Conservation Initiative, which is a King County initiative to protect and acquire lands that meet certain criteria in King County, and I'll get to that in a second. We have had historically some programs that dealt with the unregulated weeds and some knotweed along some rivers, and also some other smaller projects like yellow flag iris along lakes. But this was the first time we're really doing sort of a larger across the county control of certain things. The county council funded us as part of our assessment increase for the 2019 budget and added money primarily for contractor control and staffing, and some small money for staffing and supplies to implement what was soon to be called the Healthy Lands Project. Those efforts, those control efforts, were to sort of match what the sort of land conservation initiative was doing across King County. And so the land conservation initiative was to protect kind of the last greatest places, parcels along King County. And so they sort of identified 65,000 acres of potentially open space and said, let's do that in the next 30 years. And since that actually has been accelerated to be under 30 years and closer to 15 years. And so what protection looks like, it could be acquisitions, easement, through current use taxation, and transfer of development rights. And what the Healthy Lands Project does is works on these parcels that have been protected or will be protected through the LCI. And I'll give a really, hopefully a good example towards the end with lots of nice pictures. You've seen this graph before today in a slightly different form. Just sort of want to give you the context of what we're sort of trying to do here with the more widespread unregulated weeds in King County. We're looking at the sort of right side of the curve where the areas occupied and the sort of population has saturated every place it's going to be. You're going to find it typically in the ecosystems which they're going to invade. So we're doing asset-based protection here by identifying these conservation lands, identifying some whatever resources are on those lands, and reducing significantly reducing the impact of noxious weeds on those lands. And I should say the sort of targeted noxious weeds, the ones that are having the most impact. So our aim is to kind of change the trajectory of the landscape by removing the noxious weeds. Typically, most noxious weeds you can get, about 80%, 75 to 80% control within the first year. And it's always the last 10%, the last 1% is always the hardest. So we're doing that, the big lift to get that to that 80 to 90%, which we will fund work on these lands, be it public or private. And then after 2 to 3 years, the landowner is in charge of doing that maintenance work. We're trying to get over that sort of invasion, get over the hump, so they can and get it to sort of a maintenance phase. So they have sort of the capacity and ability to do that control themselves. And so what does that look like? I'll go over the process in more detail, but we do invasive weed mapping and what we call a weed prescription, which is a control document. We get agreements from the landowner. We sort of have a non-binding agreement that they will commit to doing the work. There's sort of no penalty if they don't do the work, but we're sort of bargaining in good faith. But we also try to match them up with other partners who might give them support like revegetation or potential open space protection, and also offer technical assistance or workshops to sort of bolster their own knowledge and capacity to do the work. And then we implement the weed control through contracted crews. We will sort of do follow-up site visits to make sure things are looking good. If working with the landowner, if not, we can always go back in and do a little like booster shot with these crews after the 2 to 3 years of initial and follow-up control. The ideal is to create this long-term relationship with these landowners so they feel like they're empowered to take this work on themselves on their land. So what lands are eligible? like I said, it's all around the sort of the land conservation initiative. So this includes lands in cities and unincorporated areas that are in the process of being protected or have been recently protected. And those have been identified by the Land Conservation Initiative. It includes current use taxation, and we have forest, timber, and ag, as well as our public benefit rating system, which is more for smaller acreage protection. That's a variety of different categories. But we can also work on properties adjacent to those LCI lands and adjacent rights of way. Additionally, we've carved out some areas within King County that have been identified by part of the LCI as equity opportunity areas, and we can also do this weed control work there. The sites that we're looking at meet the definition of an opportunity area, and they generally are green spaces that sort of have the potential to function as beneficial community open space or currently doing so, but they're being impacted by noxious weeds. There's some public maps that are really nice. I can put the link a little later on, but this is one of the links to the LCI acquisition map. This will show all the lands that the LCI has considers sort of protected under this LCI, and the LCI is has a funding mechanism called Conservation Futures Trust. So like a lot of these properties you see here have been protected by the funded by the Conservation Futures tax in King County. The Healthy Lands Project has worked on maybe a quarter of these parcels. They haven't worked on all of them. So there definitely is more being protected that we have sort of capacity to do. So we are sort of prioritizing and trying to work with our county partners and city partners to do this work there. Additionally, we're working with private landowners whose lands might not be protected at all or have been protected through conservation easements, and trying to do that weed control work on those lands. This is the map of the equity opportunity areas. And so, what the heck is that? This is a product of the Equity Open Space Cabinet's report. They sort of looked at what the LCI was doing. They said, hey, you weren't protecting anything in the sort of more urban areas, but those are really important, and we got to protect green space there. And so there were some definitions around what this equity opportunity areas were, and then it sort of it waived a match waiver for acquisitions in those areas, land protection acquisitions and other land protection. What constitutes an equity opportunity area, there's 3 mapped criteria. And that includes, it's the highest 1/3 zip codes for hospitalization for asthma, diabetes, and heart disease. And so health outcomes. It also has the lowest 1/3 of census tracts for income. So we're talking about resources and income, as well as limited or no publicly owned or accessible open space within a 1/4 mile in urban areas and 2 miles in rural areas. And this actually has changed somewhat with the 2020 census, but for the most part, this is what it looks like. And we also have a public map that shows what it is, and this is the link to it, and you can get more detailed information on exactly what these are. So that's the sort of overview of what lands are sort of eligible for this work. So not every parcel in King County is eligible for this. The site is identified as a help candidate in some capacity, be it through referrals by partner agencies, King Conservation District, or cities, or just landowners reaching out to us. A lot of the King County staff the King County Noxious Weed Control specialists are working with landowners already, and they implement a lot of these programs or help implement these programs, and they're also talking with landowners and referring them to the Healthy Lands Project for weed control funding. We contact the landowner or they contact us. We'll do a quick assessment. We track everything in a GIS Enterprise, ArcGIS Enterprise feature service. and I'll go into that a little later. Once we do this quick assessment, we sort of gauge where the landowners, what they want to do, where they want to go with this. We do some invasive mapping inventory. So we do a very thorough job inventorying the property. We'll look at cultural resources review if there's going to be ground disturbance. We'll also review critical areas and understand local ordinances around that. You know, there's herbicide restrictions in some cities. And so we'll take that all into an account, and then we'll draft a control plan, which we call a weed prescription, and work with the landowner to finalize that. And then they'll sign a sort of an agreement that says, yes, you can do the work as defined in this control plan. From that control plan, we'll develop a work order for the vendor. Oh, there we go. So agreement signed, the work order is finalized, and we send it out to bid. We have a select vendor pool, which includes restoration companies. These crews are used to sort of more rugged areas, working on steeper slopes, or just working in blackberry thickets. So they do great work. Contractor is selected. You sort of give the notice to proceed, and then work can begin. We give contractors program phones that we pay for to submit work activity via the ArcGIS, our ArcGIS database, and through Survey 123. The first year, we're looking at trying to get 80 to 85 reduction in the weeds. The follow-up treatments, using the second year, we're trying to get to 90%. After 2 to 3 years, we don't fund contractors anymore, but we can help in other ways. We can do small amounts of plant purchases under $200 per landowner, and offer some in-house control if need be. But the noxious weed staff, a lot of the regional control specialists and riparian specialists, remain in contact with the landowner and offer check-ins and support. So this is how we're tracking the work. Again, we're using Enterprise, formerly ArcGIS Online, but now we're in Enterprise portal, working with web maps and apps, as well as field maps on our phones. We have a phase layer that helps track process. We have a scoping survey that provides quick assessments that we can take field notes, quick notes while we're in the field doing those initial visits. We do that more comprehensive noxious weed inventory through field maps and quick capture. And then the contractors put in a series of activity logs through Survey 123, and those involve weed control, planting when they do, and some maintenance activities when the site requires it. This is what these phases mean, and I'm not going to sort of go over all of them, but we do have sort of initial interest, crew time, maintenance, and then we're getting now. Healthy Lands Project is going on its 5th year, so we're starting to really get the time to go back and see where some of these projects that we haven't funded control on for a number of years, go back and see where those are. This is what it looks like on our web maps. It can be a bit of a hodgepodge sometimes of different phases. The red's crew time, the blue is initial interest. Point of showing this is that we can track as we go and really see what lands are in what phase, and this has since been updated. This is from about 2 years ago. The Survey 123 forms are really useful because they allow us to get good data from the contractors. They use the field maps to launch Survey 123, and this way we sort of have a direct link to the zone and site names. They enter their hours, they put in a geospatial location, and then they do the sort of control list. So they'll enter the species name, area control, percent cover, yes or no to follow-up work, and control method. So it's fairly straightforward, pretty easy questions. But what this allows us to do is take that data and we integrate it with Power BI, and we can produce top level reporting outputs really easily. There's some editing that has to happen, user error, and just new crews come on, there has to be trained, they have to be trained and whatnot. So it's not no work, but it does take a little work to make sure folks are using all those Survey 123 forms correctly. But you can kind of see the progression from 2019, starting off with 4.1 net area of control, 8 sites. Fast forward to just finishing up 2023, we're at 49 sites with almost 92 acres of control. And you can also see how much follow-up control, which is important. You know, we're not just doing that initial control. We're really, the goal is to leave the site with all the noxious weeds that we targeted to be under 90% reduced, so 10% of their original footprint. This is our sort of all-time control area. And so I just thought it'd be, you know, if you're wondering what type of work, you know, what weeds are you seeing? And it should surprise no one that we're controlling the most of blackberry. And holly is a King County weed of concern, so we can control it as part of the Healthy Lands Project, even though it's not designated as a noxious weed at the state level. But it is a serious forest weed, and we are controlling it on those upland forest parcels and all around where we encounter it. And then we have ivy, Scotch broom, Bohemian hybrid knotweed, canary grass, and you can see the list there. And holly, ivy, and blackberry is most of our control work. There are a few other things that come into play, and we've been learning, you know, how to control these weeds as we go, and we're still turning dials. This is sort of just a map to show what our spatial distribution of project sites look like, and you know, you can see that we've worked all across King County, mostly around river systems, but also in and around a recently protected open space. Just to give you an idea that we are across all of King County, and we do have parcel assemblages where we're working on, you know, maybe 2 or 3 40-acre parcels, or we've done work 2 years ago on one parcel, but now another parcel has come into the King County Parks inventory, or it's been recently protected, and we'll be working on that. The story I'll tell to sort of iterate it and highlight kind of how we do the work is the story of Glendale Forest. Now, Glendale is a 5-acre forested parcel in an urban unincorporated part of King County. It was on our radar, working with one of the county land on the open space team. They sort of are doing projects, but also seeking relationships with landowners for acquisition. Told us about this project, and this is in one of those equity opportunity areas. King County Parks was able to apply for funding to get this protected and not have to offer a waiver, a 50% match waiver. We worked with that King County Park staff on the open space team to get permission from the landowner, who did not live in this country, to map the weeds in the winter of 2020. King County Parks then acquired the parcel in June 2020, but because we have already mapped the weeds, we did the weed prescription. We kind of turned that into a work order, and we were able to queue up work fairly quickly. And we prioritized this work because it was in one of those equity opportunity areas. And we had help crews. Dirt Corps was the crew that did it, and they started work there in June 2020. This gives you a little idea of where it was in relation to King County. It doesn't look like much of an urban area, but this area actually had little public natural areas up against a state highway with some wetland buffered areas. There's a golf course nearby. There's a school, but there really isn't sort of a place that's in a more natural state for the residents to enjoy. And this also abuts an apartment complex, so you sort of have a dense kind of living situation, and also some smaller parcels of single family housing. And this is what it looked like. You know, it was the who's who of noxious weeds. It had a decent native deciduous canopy, had a few evergreen trees, but it really was just being completely inundated with blackberry and ivy and holly. You get a sense here in this photo of just the scale of everything. Almost every tree had ivy in it. It was going down to the creek that cut through the property. There was scattered holly, some laurel, and so in our mapping, we identified almost 3 acres of ivy, over 3 acres of blackberry, and this is gross cover. About 2 acres of common holly. I mean, that was much smaller in terms of the net area, but the idea is that this place was covered with noxious weeds in every way. We hired Dirt Corps in 2020 to start that work. That was a competitive bid process. They got started. They did the initial control. We cut all got the ivy off the trees. We used herbicide. We also used manual control in places. Second year, we saw the forest really respond and kind of bounce back really well. All of a sudden, where we killed the blackberries and cleared the ivy, you have these spring ephemerals coming through. And so almost immediately, the idea of help is to move the trajectory away from invasion towards one of sort of recovery and increasing noxious weed cover. And just by simply doing the control work, we were doing that. This is what it looked like in spring 2021, all the ivy's off the trees and the crew's doing follow-up work on blackberry and ivy, sort of on the more higher parts of it. There's another view of it. This is before some of that ivy got more controlled and some of the follow-up blackberry, but over the next from 2020 to 2022, we cleared almost 3.5 net acres of blackberry, over 1.5 acres of ivy, the holly, and those are all initial controls. And you can kind of see we did the follow-up control as well. It's worth noting that our follow-up controls, what we do more follow-up control versus less follow-up control on. Certainly blackberry very easily comes back. It's in the seed bank. It really is. You have to be more of a vigilant on that. Interestingly enough, the knotweed never really came back. It disappeared pretty quickly. It was kind of in a disturbed, well-drained soil. It kind of was already, I think, stressed. And so one stem has come back in 2023, and we're going to treat that next year. So this is what it's looking like these days. We had last fall, we had a crew come through and do a little more control work. The Washington Trails Association has a program here that they're building trail for more public access. So we're sort of doing that work in partnership with, in association with them in a way to make sure both of our efforts align. And this spring, again, just to sort of leave you with what's happening on this site, when you're removing that invasive species pressure, this is a really wet mesic forest. It's on the base of a hill, so we do have a lot of water coming in, and it's just allowing these spring ephemerals, which just were either struggling or in the seed bank under the blackberries and ivy to thrive. Since there has been some planting by King County Parks, those pink flaggings are either where there's protected plants like that trillium or planted stuff, some evergreens and shrubs. So that's the Healthy Lands Project. I'm sure I haven't looked at all the questions, but I'm happy to answer some questions now. The increasing deforestation of Seattle affecting exotic weed problems. Well, I think it's kind of multiple pathways, but one of the two things that's happening is that it's the lack or degrading canopy cover is allowing light to penetrate, and that light is allowing those species that would otherwise be controlled somewhat by shade, like blackberry, to really thrive. And what it's also doing is just creating some disturbance. Wind throw allows trees to come down. That tree opens up disturbance areas, and so kind of a twofold problem with increased disturbance. And if there's any kind of erosion issues happening, because there's less, there's like monocultures of ivy, which don't do really hold the soil in together. Then that creates additional pathways for those exotic weed problems to continue. So our ivy control BMPs, right now we're doing a 3 to 4% triclopyr and a bit of 4% surfactant, and we've been pretty effective with that depending on time of year. We've also done, I think, a 2% imazapyr and been effective in that. We have tried out Vastland, which is the choline formula of triclopyr. It has been effective, but it's very slow going. One thing I've noticed about ivy control is that sometimes you will not notice ivy being controlled, or you won't notice the ivy looking dead until the summer drought. It kind of stays green. It may not look healthy, but it stays green enough where you're questioning whether or not you had effective control, and then the summer drought usually kills it off. So that's something to note, that if you're controlling in the winter, you might not see efficacy until the summer.